Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to another episode of the Think Clinical podcast. My name is Hamza. Over the last couple of weeks, we've been looking at some really important tools as far as the strategic planning process is concerned, and just understanding the business or what you're trying to do and understanding it properly. Today is no different. We'll be looking at another very important strategic planning process or tool, which is just looking at how to really evaluate whether the healthcare industry is an attractive industry for you to invest in or not. And this was simplified by a Harvard Business School professor, Michael E. Porter, in 1979, where he came up with the 5 forces he thought, or he clearly explained, were important drivers as far as finding out whether an industry is attractive or not, or whether an industry is would be easy to thrive in or not, based on some 5 what he called 5 forces that would determine how attractive it is going to be. So the Porter's 5 forces, just look at it as at an industry level. And today what I'm attempting to do is look at this in the context of healthcare and look at the healthcare industry. Based on those 5 forces, are we positioned well enough to actually see some success as far as the healthcare sector is concerned? It's an attractive industry based on those 5 forces. So today that's what we'll be looking at, and this is at the level of what we call a competition analysis. So we have competitor analysis, which everybody should know, and a competition analysis, which is always at the industry level, and that's just looking at what makes the industry attractive. So today what we are going to be doing is more of a competition analysis. Again, if you need a refresher on this, competitor analysis is usually at the firm level or at the organizational level. So you just have one organization or your healthcare firm studying another healthcare firm and looking at ways to outperform them. That's what competitor analysis is all about. But when you talk about competition analysis, this is usually at the industry level, and it's just what makes that industry, like a healthcare industry, attractive for people to want to come in or leave. So mostly when we look at the determinants of how profitable an industry is, one of the things that you look at is the value of the products or services that they provide to the customers. And when you look at a sector like the healthcare sector, the value is very clear. And I've said this in previous videos where I said, if you go into a healthcare business, the value of saving lives and improving people's health is very basic. So the value healthcare services provide is very clear, regardless of how you look at it, whether you're starting a hospital, whether you're starting a healthcare technology company, whatever you decide to start, there's always a huge value to it. So that is already something that makes the healthcare sector profitable. Another determinant of how profitable an industry is, and in this case the healthcare industry, is the intensity of competition. Now that is something that you need to be very strategic about, because there is a lot of competition in every form of healthcare business that you go through. And a couple of years ago, healthcare technology companies were not competing as fiercely as they do now, but right now there's an app or there's a device for everything that you could possibly think about, because it's becoming very difficult to compete within the space. So again, the more the competition, the lower your profit. But now we're looking at value, which is in the industry. We are looking at competition, which is very high in the industry. And now the third one is the relative bargaining power of the different stages when you look at the value chain. And those are some of the things we'll be looking deeper into. But before we do that, let's look at some market structure definitions. When you go into an industry, we have different types of industry. We have some industries that are monopolized, or they are monopolies, which means that we just have one supplier of these goods and services who supplies to many patients, many clients, or many countries, right? We have the additional one of an oligopoly, where you have just a limited competition. So the market is shared by just a few number of companies within the industry. Obviously, that's not what healthcare is about. So the third one is a fragmented industry where customers, there's no single company that has that much ability to move the entire industry, and that's how the healthcare industry is positioned. It's more of a fragmented industry because you have so many different companies that have the ability to compete within the context of what the value of the industry provides. So that being said, when we look at the structural determinants as proposed by Porter, or Michael E. Porter, in 1979, one of the first things he talks about when you're evaluating how attractive an industry is what is the threat to new entrants. Now, is the threat high or is it low? What does this mean? The barrier to entry, do people find it easy to enter the industry, or are there barriers that make it difficult for people to enter? Because if it's easy for people to enter into the industry, with time there will be a lot of competition. The industry will get choked. You'll be competing with everybody for everything, and that's not going to make you very profitable. So you want an industry that has a high barrier of entry, like the healthcare industry, because we have regulatory barriers. And the capital requirements is a huge barrier too, because you need a lot of money to start a healthcare business. Most of the time, if you are starting a hospital business, it's going to require a lot of capital. The third thing that you may look at is brand loyalty. So by the time I start my hospital, so many patients already have or owe loyalty to so many different hospitals or so many providers that they would not want to compromise that to start with me as a new business. So it makes it very difficult for new entrants, for new people to come into the industry. Economies of scale. We have larger healthcare businesses that are able to attain economies of scale because of just the magnitude of what they have. So if you are going into such an industry, if you look at the healthcare industry with a high barrier of entry, that's good, because then it limits the number of people who can just come in there. It limits the amount of competition that would happen, even though there is competition within the healthcare industry. But your strategy would be to analyze the level of loyalty that you have within the organization. If you are bringing in a healthcare app, if you are bringing a device, how are people reacting to what's already on the market? How loyal are they to the hospitals? How loyal are they to using specific devices or specific medications? Once you're able to establish that, that should inform whether or not it's something you want to do. You want to go above the barrier of entry and then get in. The second force, according to Porter, is the bargaining power of suppliers. Now you realize that these suppliers have a huge influence on what you get, but then we have very few suppliers that are specialized in a lot of different things. So it gives them a huge bargaining power, because one, there's increased demand for healthcare services, but most importantly, there is also an increased demand for the supplies, because people need them to be able to provide the service that they are supposed to provide. The critical nature of these suppliers, and we call that the criticality of it, is that there's a critical nature to these supplies that people need. They are very critical to what we do in healthcare businesses. So if we talk about the second force, it's really high in healthcare because suppliers have a very high bargaining power as far as we're concerned. Now, so far you might say this is not a very attractive industry because it balances out somehow. We'll go to the third one, which is, and I mean, so just to talk about the bargaining power suppliers, when you, or if you get into such an industry, the big thing you should do is you negotiate long-term contracts, lock your fees in the long term, and make sure that those inflation and other things don't affect you as far as you're concerned. The third item is focused on bargaining power of buyers. Now, one of the factors that influences this is buyer information. And if now we are increasingly having people or patients who are well informed on their health, what they need as far as good health is concerned, and they're able to compare prices. So when you have buyers who have enough information, then that bargaining power of buyers or that bargaining power of buyers really is high. Now what that means is that they have the ability to choose who they want to go to. And the only way in terms of strategy that you can combat that is, first of all, to enhance transparency and communication with patients. And most importantly, people are price sensitive now, so you need to also have competitive pricing as far as your competitors are concerned. So it's not just about the quality of service that you provide or how transparent you are about those, but then also making sure that you have competitive prices that patients can compare to, because they have information and they are going to compare based on that information. The fourth item is the threat to substitute. So do patients have the ability to bring in substitute services? Google could be a substitute for the healthcare industry. People go on Google or AI platforms, ask them medical questions, and they get answers. They get recommendations on what they need to do. These things are becoming increasingly prevalent in our current times, especially with AI platforms springing up and getting more and more intelligent and able to provide answers to people that relatively may be accurate or not, because you can never compare those responses to a medical practitioner who has practiced or done all this training for so many years and has seen and done this for so long. But again, once these things are available, it makes it easy for people to be able to compare some of these services. So can they substitute yourself? Of course they can. So all these things become threats, and we are having an increasing number of these things. So your strategy is to monitor the trend of this technology. If we talk about technology, for instance, monitor how this technology is trending, what is the new thing now, and incorporate it into your services. That is how you would be able to overcome this threat. But it's high. This is high. And the last one is the rivalry among competitors. And one of the biggest indicators of rivalry is market growth. So if you have an industry which is growing very slowly, competition is usually very fierce, because you have people who are in an industry fighting for a market share in an industry that's not growing really quick. So you realize that everybody is struggling to hold on to the little growth that this industry sees. But again, the healthcare industry sees a lot of growth and it's rapid. So this is not going to be an issue. How many competitors do you have in the space? As far as the healthcare industry is competitive, there's an increasing demand for healthcare, which makes it even more appealing, more attractive for anyone who wants to go into the healthcare industry. The lack of differentiation. Healthcare industry now is becoming highly differentiated. So if you look at these three factors, the rivalry among existing competitors would be relatively low. Even though there's some competition, it would be relatively low. You have quite a significantly moderate threat to substitute services because of all these platforms that can offer or give answers to patients. The bargaining power of buyers is, I would say, moderate. The bargaining power of suppliers is moderate, and the threat to new entrants is low. So the threat of new entrants, people cannot get into this industry as a healthcare industry because of all the things I mentioned. You have buyers who have a moderate ability to bargain as far as, and services or buyers who also have a moderate ability to bargain. If you put all this together, this is a relatively attractive industry that you can invest in. And just understanding this competitive environment puts you in a strategic point where you are able to really make the decision on how you enter and how you combat some of these threats that may come out. So this is what Michael Porter put forward in terms of just finding out how attractive, and my attempt today was to apply this in the context of the healthcare sector. So you can apply this to any other sector you want to go in, but since this is what we do on this platform, that's why we applied it to this sector. Look at it carefully when you are going in and think about the strategies, even if that force is high, the threat of that force is high. Again, this has been another very exciting episode. I'm so happy again to walk through some of these things with you. Feel free to leave your comments in the comment section. I'm happy to engage you, and then we will see you again in the next episode. Have a good one.